I'm using the remaining battery in my phone to send this message. They're coming for me, and I don't know how much time I have left. April 30th was when the total solar eclipse started. I say started because it never really ended, and it doesn't look like it will end anytime soon. The day it happened, the whole city was prepared. Everyone bought those special glasses, which allowed you to look at the eclipse without risking your eyesight. Being the space geek that I am, I forked over my hard-earned cash to get a pair for myself and my closest friend, Ava. 10 minutes before the eclipse was due to start, Ava and I stood at the window of my apartment. My apartment was on the second floor of the building, so we were still pretty close to the ground. Looking around, I could see hundreds, maybe thousands of people standing on the side of the city streets in anticipation of the rare event. Anyone who didn't want to stand outside gazed eagerly through the windows. I glanced up at the moon, and it was just starting to move in front of the sun. Ava and I slipped on the glasses and pressed against the window to get a better view. Within the span of just a few minutes, the moon completely covered the sun. The world turned dark. A chorus of oohs and ahs erupted from the streets below. The sun made a white ring around the black shape of the moon. At least, it was supposed to be a white ring. It was green. I was confused beyond belief. The sun shouldn't be green. Maybe it was just a trick of the light. I took off my glasses and inspected it more closely. It was green. This wasn't right. I stared at Ava in disbelief, and she was just as confused as I was. We've both seen several solar eclipses before, and none of them were ever bright green. The crowd on the street ahead suddenly parted. People began backing away slowly from something I couldn't quite see. It was only when the crowd took off screaming in two different directions that I could see who, or what was so frightening. A single man stood in the middle of the road. He was gripping his forearm, while screaming in agony. He scratched at his face. My eyes, he shouted. I could hear the pain in his voice. He doubled over, landing on his knees. His head hit the pavement. His hands gripped the back of his neck and he shook violently. Crack, 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 I screamed. His legs broke completely on their own. They stretched outwards until another deafening crack set them in place. The same thing happened to his arms, and not long after, his neck. When he stood up, I was terrified. His legs were long and spindly as if they could break under the weight of his own body. His bony arms reached down below his knees. Clawed hands with bulging veins twitched at his sides. His neck was 6 inches long. His face was gaunt with piercing cheekbones. His lips pulled back to reveal razor-sharp teeth. His eyes were the worst part of it all. His eyes were inked black. You couldn't tell the difference between the whites of his eyes and his irises. It was all black. Altogether, he stood about 8 feet tall. As if on cue, thousands of inhuman screams echoed down the streets, followed by the sickening crack of bones. Surprisingly enough, no screams came from any of the buildings. Only the people outside were affected. I stumbled backward in surprise, emptying whatever I had for lunch that day onto the floor. I was disgusted. I was confused. But worst of all, I was scared. What the hell? Ava gasped. What the fuck happened to him? To everyone. I don't know. I replied after wiping my mouth. I knew as much as she did. After a couple more of those hideous creatures hobbled aimlessly into view, I pulled the blinds over the window. Okay, what in the actual fuck is going on? I shouted to myself, collapsing against the wall. Ava followed and sat on the floor. First, the green eclipse, and now the people are changing. I don't know what to think anymore. I exhaled a breath that I'd been holding in pure fear. This is a dream, right? Ava asked, her voice stuttering. This is just a really bad dream, isn't it? I don't know what to believe anymore, I replied. I buried my face in my hands. I didn't know what to believe either. I desperately wished I was dreaming, but deep down, I knew it was reality. Knock, 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 knock. Repeated banging came from my apartment door. Ava stood up and started to walk over. Wait, what if it's one of those things that we saw outside? I stammered. Even if it's someone who needs help, we can't risk letting someone else in. I'll look out the peephole to see what's out there, but I won't open the door. Okay, I nodded. Ava crept over to the door, grabbing a kitchen knife that was sitting on the table. She pressed her face against the door and stared out the peephole. There's nobody there, she started, but stumbled back in surprise. There was a loud bang, and the door shook on its hinges. Let me in. Open the fucking door, a man's voice shouted. Those damn freaks are in the building. Please help me. Wait, should we let him in? I stammered, looking at Ava. She looked back at me with wide eyes. The color drained from her face. That wasn't a person, she murmured, her voice shaking with fear. It was one of those things. It spoke. Those things can speak. I gasped in surprise. I guess they were originally human, but still, they shouldn't be able to speak. Ava shrugged and crawled backward away from the door. I shivered at the thought of those things. 8 feet tall, pale white skin, long spindly legs. It was a sight for sore eyes. Does this mean we can't go outside until the eclipse is over? Ava asked, turning to face me. How did that thing get in the building? And on the second floor, no less. They might have come back inside right after looking at the eclipse, I replied. But we still don't know enough about them to determine what turns people into them. She nodded in agreement. What should we do now? I asked. I might have acted calm, but I was scared shitless. I only ever saw things like this happen in horror movies. Stock up on supplies, I suppose, she responded. How much food do you have in your apartment? I stood up and crept over to the kitchen, careful to make sure my footsteps made no noise. I counted everything in the cupboards and the fridge. It wasn't enough to last long. 2 weeks worth of food. We should eat the food in the fridge first. I grunted. I wonder if we'll even be able to stay alive for that long. I said alive loosely. I knew damn well that if we died, we would become one of those things. I rushed over to the apartment door and fastened the small chain lock. I knew it wouldn't do much if those things were intelligent, but it gave me peace of mind. I didn't look out the peephole. That thing was still in the hallway, and I sure as hell didn't want it knowing I was there. I backed away from the door and crumpled onto the couch. Ding! A notification sounded on my phone. I reached over to the table beside the couch and grabbed it. My friend Portia had texted me. I'm not going crazy, right? The message said. Are you seeing what's happening outside? I rushed to reply, but Ava grabbed my shoulder before I could hit send. What if it's one of those things? She whispered in my ear. If they can talk, they could probably text, too. Who knows what they're capable of? Relax, I said. I won't tell her where we are until I know for sure that she's real. Yeah, I see it, I responded. Did you know those things could speak? No. What the hell? She texted back. Let's video chat. I'll tell you more. I replied. I got a call notification from Portia and hastily answered. I exhaled a worried breath. It was the real Portia. She was okay. Thank God, I said. I wanted to make sure you weren't one of them. Portia laughed. Our call lasted no more than 5 minutes before the connection started to drop. I gotta hang up, she said. Something is happening to the Wi-Fi. And with that, she was gone. I slumped back into the couch. Ava sat beside me. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking. I asked if she was okay, and she said she was fine. She didn't look fine. She looked scared out of her mind. I rubbed her shoulder and comforted her, despite being terrified myself. Bang, bang, bang. The front door shook. The locks rattled. The door bowed inwards with every hit. I nearly fell off the couch in surprise. I instantly got to my feet and offered Ava a hand. What the actual fuck is going on now? She whispered shakily. I nodded my head in the direction of the kitchen table. We had to block the door. I crept over to one side of it and motioned for Ava to get the other. I counted down on my fingers. 3, 2, 1. We both lifted the table and shuffled over the door. We put it down gently and shoved it against the shaking door. It was a heavy table, so it would hold up for a while. Those things are fucking strong, I said in a hurried whisper. My heart skipped a beat and my breathing quickened. If those things wanted to, they could break the front window. Help me grab the food and water. We'll bring it to my bedroom. There are no windows there, I said to Ava. She complied and picked up the packs of water. As she trudged to my room, I took a cooler out from below the sink and filled it to the brim with stuff from the fridge. I dropped the cooler into my closet and walked back to the kitchen. We each took armfuls of canned food and dropped it on the bed. Within 10 minutes, the cupboards were empty. I grabbed all the kitchen knives and utensils in the horrible scenario where we'd need to fight one of those things. I took a hammer and crowbar from under the sink and shoved them under my bed. I put the first aid kit in the bathroom, which was connected to my bedroom. The bathroom cupboard had a bunch of medicine and antibiotics should we ever come to need some. I plugged the drain in the bathtub and ran the water until it was full. If something ever happened to the water supply, we needed to have more. A mangled and human screech pierced my ears. It was a single voice that sounded like a multitude of different animals, as well as the voice of a child and the voice of a man. Horrifying was an understatement. I'd heard this kind of noise in movies, but hearing something like it in real life made it even more what the hell I started to say. But I was cut off by the loud crash of glass shattering. It came from directly below my apartment. Get away. Leave me alone, you fucking hellspawn. A woman shrieked in the apartment below. I heard the thing run. From the sound, I assumed that it ran using all 4 limbs, like a dog. The running stopped, followed shortly by a loud thump and more shouts from the woman. It jumped on her. Tears stung my eyes and I covered my mouth to avoid screaming. I will never forget what happened next. There was a sickening crunch, and her screams died out into complete silence. There was another ear-splitting scream, and the sound of muffled growling, like a wolf vigorously eating its prey. I could hear the sound of liquid squirting against the floor. I could only assume that it was her blood. That thing had killed the woman and devoured her. Without a second thought, I grabbed Ava's arm and ran into my bedroom. I locked the door and blocked it using my nightstand. We were no longer safe in this building, and there's a thing downstairs. I haven't come up with a name for them yet, but maybe I'll come up with something suitable after seeing one for myself. All I know is that Ava and I probably won't make it out of this building alive, should one of those things break into my apartment.